Hi gardeners, this is Fall Gardening 101 on carrots, and it's also on beets. And that's because you grow carrots and beets so similarly, they need most of the same requirements. It just makes sense to make one video about them. So I'm going to go through step by step. I've heard many people say carrots are the thing that confound them. They plant the seeds, they come up, they never get a carrot. So that happened to me for a long time, and then I finally did a deep dive on what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do to grow carrots? And I feel like I've won that battle now, and I normally have a really good crop of carrots in my garden. So the very first thing you need to know is you need aerated soil. Carrots are lazy, they're kind of divas, beets as well. And because it's a root that's growing into the soil, if the soil is compacted, heavy clay, dry, just hard to dig into, the carrot will just quit. It'll go dormant without water and without loose soil, and it will just sit there and not really produce any kind of a root, and the same goes for beets. So the most important thing you want to do when you're preparing your bed for fall gardening for carrots is loosen the soil up. So I've already done this, but I'm going to walk you through the steps of what I already did. I'm going to take a shovel or a scuffle hoe. I really love using the claw, which is, I can't find it. It's around here someplace, laying on the ground covered in weeds because I used it and put it down. But it's the thing you stick in the ground like this and you turn it and it loosens the soil up. And they used to sell it like on Saturday mornings, on in between commercials, they would sell this product. Then it lost its patent, and now you can buy one just about anywhere. So any hardware store probably carries one. So you want to loosen the soil up a good deep 8 to 10 inches long. So with other fruits and vegetables, I don't aerate the soil that deep at all. As a matter of fact, I try and leave the soil alone as much as possible to preserve soil structure. But with carrots, I want to go down 8 to 10 inches because if I'm growing an 8 to 10 inch carrot, it needs to be able to push through the soil. So you're going to loosen the soil up, and then you're going to mix some things in, and this is really important. I used to use peat moss all the time. I still love to use peat moss, but I don't buy it any longer because the peat bogs are important carbon sinks for climate change. To protect the climate, we need to keep all that carbon where it is. And when we harvest the peat from the peat bogs, we ruin the bog and we release all that carbon into the atmosphere. So I had to look for alternatives. So I mixed a bag of playground sand, just regular sand with nothing added to it in here. And I also mixed a bag of compost in here. I used mushroom compost because I've had such good luck with it, but also because this is fall gardening. So I already had a crop of cilantro growing here, and I had a crop of lettuce growing here, which I've harvested, and I think I might have even had garlic in here, but I can't recall. But all of those crops took nutrients out of the soil. So I need to make sure I replace it, and adding some mushroom compost is a good way to do that. So I'm going to mix all this in really well, really make sure it's light and fluffy, and I'm going to mix in some perlite as well. So you may have heard of perlite and vermiculite. You'll often see little specks of white if you buy a plant from the garden center, and you'll see this mixed in there. If you've ever done any hydroponics, early hydroponics normally used perlite or vermiculite is a replacement for their soil. I thought it was styrofoam for the longest time. I thought it was just styrofoam pellets mixed in to take up space. I didn't understand this was an all-natural mined iron alloy, completely natural, mined for this very purpose. And what this does is it soaks up and holds water and nutrients. And that's critical for all plants, but really critical for carrots because they need a constant supply of water and of nutrients to grow, or they will just sit there. Unlike other things that will fight to produce even when they don't have quite enough of their nutrients. So I mixed about 6 cups of perlite in here as well to help loosen this up a little bit and also to hold water and nutrients. So then I raked this all back out nice and smooth, but I know if I stick my finger in here, this goes right down no problem. It's nice and loose here. Really perfect for my beets and carrots. So now what I need to do, I've kind of smoothed all this out, and I'm going to come back and soak this. That is really important. Now it rained here last night, so I can skip this step today. This is soaking wet. But if you haven't had rain in a few days, or God forbid a few weeks, you're going to want to take your hose and just soak this. I mean, like, set the sprinkler up here, let it run for 20-30 minutes. You don't want to just kind of like lightly douse the top and get it that moist on the top couple inches. You want this soaked. So then I'll come back and I'll take my carrots. I have a bunch of different kinds here, and I will dump them out, and I will put them in little rows. You can sprinkle them if you want to go back and you're willing to go back and kind of weed those out later, or you can put those right in rows, and it will save you the extra step. But sometimes I like to scatter just because it's very time consuming. Carrot seeds are very small, takes forever to lay them out, so sometimes I'll just scatter them. And they like to be buried only about 1/4 of an inch deep, very little. So instead of burying them, what I do is I leave them on the top, and then I'll come back with potting mix or compost from my compost pile, and I will scatter 1/4 of an inch of light soil on top of them, so I know that they've been buried at the right level, and I don't have to go back and push every single seed into the ground. Then I'll take my hose, hit them with the water again, just to make sure every layer of that soil and the water is wet, because they need to stay wet to germinate. And this is another great trick. Take a piece of cardboard. I've seen people use lumber, like sheets of plywood for this, but I think cardboard works just as well. And I'll lay this on top because carrots and beets really like to stay wet. They do not like to dry out. Drying them out will cause them to go dormant, and it will also keep them from germinating. So I'll throw a piece of cardboard down, put a rock to hold it from blowing away, and this will just keep it from drying out. And I'll leave it like this for 4 or 5 days, and I'll come out and peel it up, and if I see them starting to germinate, I will remove it and set it aside for another project. If I don't see them starting to germinate, I will leave it for another day or two. Once you see them germinating, once you see I've got planted these a few days ago, I've got some carrots coming up already, I can see some beets are coming up, I need to keep this wet. So not soaking wet, but you don't want it to dry out for a couple of days, like if we have a heat wave, because they'll just stop growing. And so keeping this moist and keeping them protected in that way, making sure you have the loose soil when you plant them, will ensure that you are on your way to a good carrot harvest. So this is how we're going to plant them. Beets are the same way. Once they do emerge, there's another step we need to go back and take care of, but I'll cover that a little bit later on when we're dealing with that in a couple of weeks. So let me know if you have questions about carrots or beets, and I urge you to go out and get started. All right, that's Fall Gardening 101 with carrots and beets.